Howdy and hello everyone, and welcome to the 5008 Rumor Report, a series where I look into news, rumors, and whatever else is happening along those lines in the rail industry. Today, we will be looking at Amtrak's Horizon coaches, specifically what on earth is happening with them. Starting off, let's get a bit of background. In the late 1980s, Amtrak began receiving a fleet of cars similar to the Comet commuter coach. These coaches would be dubbed Horizons and would enter service from 1989 to the early 1990s. These coaches ran alongside the older Amfleet 1 coaches and similarly aged Amfleet 2s. They were most commonly seen along corridor routes in the eastern half of the United States, but would also be found on West Coast routes. Horizon cars went through refurbishments in the late 2010s and early 2020s, and up until spring 2025, ran almost exclusively along corridor routes such as the Cascades, Borealis, Downeaster, among others. However, in late March 2025, an issue arose. During a routine inspection of the Horizon coaches, a large amount of corrosion was found in their frames, which led to them all being pulled from service. Thankfully, Amfleet coaches were able to fill in for most of them, but just barely, and given Amtrak's equipment shortage, these coaches are needed sooner rather than later. But it's almost November 2025, and these coaches are still nowhere to be seen, and Amtrak has been all quiet on what's been going on with them. So, let's go digging in the internet to find out where these coaches have been and what's been taking so long. Most of what I'll be stating in this video comes from these two forums on trainorders.com. Yeah, we're really diving into whatever the hell goes territory. The first one directly involves our issue at hand here, where someone asked, "Any word on the fate of the Horizon cars being evaluated?" Where someone proceeded to respond with the following. "Last I heard unofficially, a dozen or so are going or have gone to Alstom for repairs. The rest sit and rust/corrode. The user then continued with a remark on Amtrak's handling of the Horizon cars. "What a waste. Metro North, SEPTA, and NJ Transit have cars of identical construction, but they inspect, clean, and repair. One highly placed executive, whom I cannot name, at one of those agencies said to me that what Amtrak has done with the Horizons is shamefully neglectful. He stopped short of criminally because there is no law covering neglectful destruction of property that was purchased with taxpayer funds." If we are to believe this user is speaking truthfully, then it's safe to assume that the Horizon cars are actively being worked on by Alstom, most likely in their factory in Hornell, New York. If I had to guess, we'd see a return to service in mid to late 2026, maybe early 2027 if things do truly take long enough. Also in this forum is some info that gives us a lead on just why the Horizons specifically have been having corrosion issues and not something such as the Superliners or the Amfleets. What I have read elsewhere is that Metro North Railroad, during equipment overhauls in 2009 in Stamford shops, found electrosis corrosion in the frame, cut away that, and added bracing. NJT Comet 2s are over 40 years old now, older than Amtrak's, though got an outsourced rebuild at some point, forgot what years. This leads us smoothly into the other trainorders.com forum, which gives us info on the electrosis corrosion. As you read through this introductory sheet about 44 coaches and 6 cafe cars, you will see that the cars are aluminum bodies with a steel underframe. This use of construction materials has now 20 years later become a big problem for Amtrak as the steel car frame meets the aluminum body. We all hope that some alteration or change might enable these cars to have further service on the Amtrak system. Most of them are out of service at this time, with modifications in progress at a New York State car shop. I would say that they are basically a commuter coach, with a few modifications for inner-city passenger car. 5 hours between Chicago and St. Louis was quite enough for me. As stated by the sheet regarding the Horizons linked in the article, Horizons have aluminum car bodies with a steel underframe. The issue with mixing aluminum and steel is that it causes the previously mentioned electrosis corrosion, which occurs when two different metals are connected in a presence of an electrolyte. In the case of Horizon car bodies, the steel would be the one to corrode, while the aluminum would experience less corrosion. And the electrolyte causing the corrosion could easily be things such as salt water in the air, which would specifically plague cars stored in the Pacific Northwest for Cascades and the Northeast for Downeaster and other services. This could explain why this issue got so bad, as the corrosion was on the inside, not the outside of the car body. Now, that's not to say this is a bad way of making the coaches. Coaches commonly use steel frames with aluminum bodies. A good example would be the Bombardier bi-level coach, which uses a steel frame and an aluminum shell either bolted or welded to the frame. The most likely reason why this is just a problem for the Horizons would be because of the neglect maintenance-wise on Amtrak's behalf, and these coaches being initially built for commuter rail service, not inner-city passenger rail service. As stated by the first quote, it appears in comparison to commuter rails that use similar coaches such as the NBTA or NJT, Amtrak didn't take care of the Horizons as well as they should, which, if you're familiar with other topics I've covered on this channel, you will most likely not be surprised by. Just like the Siemens Chargers and their issues with premature aging, it appears the Horizons are another delayed example of Amtrak not putting enough money and attention into their maintenance. Now, I must preference, this is not a knock at maintenance employees who work at Amtrak. Rather, this is directed at those who make the decisions as to how much is being put into maintenance at Amtrak, and more broadly, the people in charge of getting Amtrak funding. But that last point is a discussion for another day. Now, the other point is, these cars weren't initially designed for inner-city passenger rail like the Amfleets or Superliners. They were designed for commuter rail service, and then in pursuit of finding a cheap, quick way of increasing service, were bought by Amtrak and slightly modified to fit inner-city rail service. I wouldn't be surprised if the Horizons are much more susceptible to things such as corrosion because they're supposed to be in the hands of a much smaller agency, which can put more focus and time into their coaches. This is all in line with the statement of what Amtrak has done with the Horizons is shamefully neglectful. Simply put, the reason why the Horizon cars went out of service was most likely due to neglect on Amtrak's part, which in and of itself was most likely caused by those in charge failing to give Amtrak the support it needs to not have issues such as coaches being pulled from service or an entire series of locomotives prematurely aging. With all that being said, the second forum link also stated that the Horizon coaches are with Alstom and are being worked on, so given that Amtrak hasn't said anything, it's safe to say the Horizons are being worked on and will hopefully be back within the next year or so, which, funnily enough, will be just in time for when they won't be needed as much anymore, as the first Aero set will most likely be in service on Cascades by then. So there you go. According to the internet, that is the current status of the Horizons, and a more in-depth reasoning of why their corrosion got so bad in the first place. Obviously, we will know nothing for sure until Amtrak or Alstom themselves have come out to speak on the current status of these cars, but for now, this is the best we've got. So, without much more to say, I hope you enjoyed this video, and depending on when this comes out, happy early or late Halloween. I will most likely be at home streaming a dumb horror game here on the channel, but I hope everyone watching gets to do something less depressing on that day. So, be sure to enjoy that, and I was 5008 Creations, you were the viewer, and I'll see you in the future. Goodbye.